You're listening to the Vint Wine Podcast, where you'll hear interviews and stories from around the wine world. From writers and critics to winemakers and sommeliers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping wine culture. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of 5 Questions presented by the Vint Marketplace. In these interviews, we highlight world-class writers and critics, winemakers, and sommeliers featured on our full-length episodes in a quick 5-question format. We hope you learn more about a new producer, what makes their wine special. Enjoy.
All right, we are here with 5 questions with Charles Curtis, MW. Our first question here is, what is your primary area of focus in terms of regions and or styles in wine?
I have 2. I'm allowed 2 because I'm old. Burgundy and Champagne.
Along with that, are you predominantly consulting with that? I think that's your predominant work. And you also have written books about that. Is that right?
I've published a book on each of those topics, and I have more books in the works. One that will be out this year on Champagne, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, if I get some free time this summer, I'll have another one for 2026. It is partly consulting, but also writing is very important to the books for Champagne and for Decanter magazine writing about Burgundy.
Charles, you're not a cartographer, but maps are a big part of your current project. I know that you've studied things like classifications in Burgundy and some of your other projects. How much do these sort of visual representations of regions mean in your mind to consumers and wine enthusiasts?
Looking at maps is the easiest shortcut to understanding a region if you haven't been able to get there in person. The best way to understand a region is to go there and visit and stay for a long time and drink lots of wine. That's what I always recommend to people, because the more you drink, the more you know. Sometimes it's true, the more you drink, the more you fall down, but hopefully that's not the case. But if you don't have a chance to go to some place, the easiest way to learn about a wine region is to study the maps. There's so many resources, from really old maps that I love to pore over, to Google Maps online, to the Institut Geographic de France, which has a website that's fantastic to consult. And I get so much information from maps, it's hard to overestimate its importance.
Awesome. And then I think I'm going to combine questions 3 and 4 here. What are some of your favorite vintages? And it can be based on any parameter you want to have for both Burgundy and Champagne, maybe 2 that are available in the market now, and then one that's maybe a historical one for each that has stood out over the years.
Oh, that's an interesting question. So I think in Burgundy, you have to deal with the question of, is it a red wine vintage or a white wine vintage? And in terms of recent red wine vintages, 19 is absolutely unstoppable. 19 is good for whites too, but it's really good for reds. For whites and Burgundy, I just drank a bunch of 14s, and I really love the 14s. But I think for a friendly vintage that's coming around earlier than people expected, you cannot go wrong with 17s in both reds and whites. It wasn't the most highly heralded vintage, but those wines are in such a nice place right now. I think that that's a very easy answer to, if you see a 17 on wine list, you should just go ahead and buy it, because it's going to be great. And if you look for another vintage from the past, you could go crazy. But I think you could easily say that 90 is also a tremendous vintage, something with a little bit of age, both in red and white, that's drinking really well right now. So that's Burgundy. And Champagne, Champagne. I'm getting ready to do an event in London. I was just working on it today for the Decanter's Fine Wine Encounter. It's a survey of the 2012 vintage, which I think is the greatest of recent vintages in Champagne. I love the 12s. I love the 8s. But there's also, in Champagne, like in Burgundy, you can have a vintage that's good for white wine and not so good for Pinot Noir, so the blends are not as good. So 07, for example, doesn't have the same reputation as 08, but 7 for white wines for Blanc de Blanc was a really good vintage. And so I think it's important to understand the vintages to it in order to be able to decide. Don't write something off just because you had one wine that you didn't like from that particular vintage. 12, 8, 4 is good and not so expensive. 2 is also very good and not so expensive. And then for an older vintage that's drinking crazy now is, I would have to say 88 in Champagne. Is a high acid year. I love high acid years. I'm just an acid head from way back. And I think those wines they don't have the flesh of the 89s or 90s, but they've got a beautiful profile, and I think they're in a good spot.
For the amount of time that you spend drinking wine not from Burgundy or from Champagne, what are some other regions around the world, and maybe give one here domestically that you have your eye on and that are on your table often?
Oh, here domestically, I have to give 2 though, because I used to cover both Oregon and New York State for Decanter, and I love that. But they sort of reordered the writing assignments, and they took me out of those 2 regions, but they gave me Chablis and Beaujolais instead. But in the U.S., those are still like my 2 favorite regions: is the Willamette Valley and the Finger Lakes. And I do drink both of those with astonishing regularity. And the other thing that I really, really love, but I don't get there very often in person, but I don't speak the language, is Germany. I love wines from the Mosel and the Rheingau and the Pfalz and pretty much all parts of Germany. And I wish I got there more often. I am going to Germany in a couple of weeks, so I'll be very happy to do that.
Well, thank you so much. That has been 5 Questions with Charles Curtis.
Thanks so much.